All right, welcome everybody to today's webinar. It's called Cycling Towards Equitable Mobility, how starting with empathy inspires safer streets for everyone, comparing experience from the Netherlands and Canada. It is brought to you by the Consulate General of the Netherlands in Vancouver and our friends at Hub Cycling. My name is Sebastiaan Messerschmidt. I'm the Consul General for the Kingdom of the Netherlands. We're based in Vancouver. And I'm glad that you're all able to join us during this Lunch and Learn session for those who are joining us on the Pacific Coast. Anybody else, probably in other time zones, might not be lunch. Special thanks to our esteemed presenters that you're going to meet very soon. As the Consulate General of the Netherlands in Vancouver, we are dedicated to build networks and to connect ecosystems between Western Canada and the Netherlands. We focus on increasing collaboration on different levels, business to business, research to research, and also government to government. We want to learn from each other. We want to innovate together. And given the current international political climate, I think this is the best time to say that we should get as close together as we can get. I'm glad to be building stronger collaboration in the field of urban mobility, especially when we talk bicycles. Bicycles are a passion of mine. Sustainable urban mobility is good for our health. It is good for our wallet, and it is good for our planet. And riding the bicycle is just outright fun. It is relaxing, and it makes total sense. As we will discuss today, with the proper support, it can play a vital role in making transportation more equitable to all people in society. In my former job as Consul General in Cape Town, South Africa, I ran into an inspirational lady who goes by the name of Lebogang. Lebogang was the bicycle mayor of Cape Town, a bicycle advocate in an unequal and car-centric city. As I'm riding my bicycle with this bicycle mayor through the congested streets of Cape Town, she explains to me, Cape Town as a vehicular city is unsustainable. The traffic, the fumes, in a context with very little social solidarity, and with racialized divisions, a cycling culture can hopefully help us flatten and break down those divisions when we encounter each other physically in mobility into the same spaces, even though we come from different places. Philosophical, practical, and poetic, beautifully worded. To add to her words, the poorest who are commuting from the townships into the city of Cape Town for daily labor would sometimes spend 25% of all of their wages just on getting to work and back home. A bicycle could be the solution for that if the infrastructure to ride would be adequate and safe in South Africa. Alas. Now, how's that in Canada? How's that in the Netherlands? How does urban sustainable mobility relate to questions of equity and equality? We will hear more today. But before we start the presentations by our knowledgeable speakers, I would like to especially thank our host, Hub Cycling. Hub Cycling is one of Metro Vancouver's most active cycling advocacy groups. It is a non-profit charitable organization with a mission to get more people cycling and more often too. Hub accomplishes this through advocacy, education, events, research, and consulting. And I've seen their work, and it's inspiring and contagious. From events like Bike the Night in Vancouver to bicycle riding classes, or initiatives like Ungap the Map, Hub Cycling aims to fill gaps in the cycling network in Vancouver and BC, making it easier for everyone to cycle more often. Their work relies on the generous support of community members like yourselves. By contributing, you help to ensure that Hub Cycling can continue to push for safer streets and better cycling conditions for all. You can find details on their website, bikehub.ca. Now, before we begin, on behalf of the Consulate General, Hub Cycling, and our speaker, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that we are hosting the webinar today from the ancestral and unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh. We acknowledge, respect, and celebrate the indigenous nations on whose treaty and unceded territories we are fortunate to live, to work, to operate, and of course, ride our bicycles. Now, just a few housekeeping rules before we begin. As you listen to the presentation, please use the chat function to ask questions. We'll give our presenters time at the end to answer questions for you. And as a reminder, the meeting will be recorded. Hub will share recording later. Please do not share sensitive or personal information in the chat function, by the way. And please state your name in the chat, followed by your organization if applicable. This will make the Q&A at the end a lot easier. So today, in Upcycling's second webinar, we are exploring the benefits of a regional, government-supported approach to micro-mobility sharing. We will address the wider impact of safe and connected bicycle-friendly infrastructure. We will focus on equity, particularly for women and underserved communities. As someone who grew up in a cycle-friendly city and cycle-friendly country, I can personally attest how investment in cycle-friendly infrastructure and micromobility sharing fosters greater access, greater safety, and confidence for all users. It encourages active travel, including historically overlooked groups who are marginalized, if you get it right. And that is what we're going to look into today. With that, I would like to introduce our three speakers. Melissa Bruntlett is a leader in advocacy and strategic advice for better walking, cycling, and public spaces. Bringing together experience in communications and engagements, she uses the power of a good narrative and storytelling to shift to more sustainable and healthy communities. Melissa translates international best practices to local context. She has lived experience in North America and in Europe and has worked all over the globe. Melissa emphasizes human stories that underpin innovation and change. She's co-author of the book Building the Cycling City, Curbing Traffic, and her newest book, Women Changing Cities, is coming out in this autumn 2025, so be on the lookout for that. She's a speaker on the subject, as we will discover today, but also is active as a digital content creator and in communications and engagement projects. She focuses on fostering understanding of how a just mobility transition starts with empathy and with recognizing people's diverse transport needs. Behavior change is only possible when we first understand why people make the mobility choices they do. Now, our second speaker will be Masa Kateb. Masa Kateb is a Syrian-Canadian storyteller, meaningful change maker, community developer, and refugee leader who advocates for refugee representation in decision-making. She has served on the Canadian Council for Refugees Steering Committee and as a refugees advisor to the Canadian government with the Refugee Advisory Network of Canada. She led Canada's only national mentorship program for refugees with refugee-led Jumpstart Refugee Talent. Recently, she participated in the Onto Ottawa Peace Caravan and completed the 200-kilometer Walk for Peace in Mi'kma'ki, Nova Scotia, advancing root causes, peace economy, and education for peace, while growing the peace movement through grassroots engagement. Her advocacy spans holistic health, youth education, cultural representation, environmental stewardship, refugee and women's economic empowerment, and older adult well-being. This all aligned with global UN Sustainable Development Goals. Kateb is a former professional basketball player and a former journalist. She co-founded the neuroscience-based coaching practice Quantum Care and preserves her heritage through traditional Syrian storytelling, bringing fresh perspective on Syrian, Arab, and Muslim culture. Masa was one of the original participants of Hub Cycling's newcomer bike mentorship program too. So, as you can see, quite a diverse background. That's not all. We also have for you Brendan James, who is a transportation planning technologist at the District of North Vancouver. Brendan's work in municipal and regional government allowed him to work alongside passionate professionals tackling society's most urgent challenges. This includes the implications of climate change, transportation congestion, and the transition to active and shared mobility. He plays a key role in developing and supporting programs that encourage sustainable transportation, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and create more livable communities. Brandon has also built strong collaborative relationships with the Metro Vancouver Regional District, the Province of British Columbia, BC Hydro, TransLink, Vancouver Coastal Health, post-secondary institutions, non-profit organizations, and federal agencies. Now, enough of my voice. Let's hear these special people. Let's turn it over to Melissa for the main presentation. Then we will hear from Masa, who has personally benefited from these programs, and then get a Canadian municipality perspective from Brendan. Melissa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, for that introduction. And I'm looking forward to presenting to everyone today. I am not in Vancouver, but if you don't already know, I am a former Vancouverite. So it's always a treat when I get to come back in whatever terms that looks like. So with that, yes, as was said today, I'm going to be talking about equity in mobility and how we can hopefully bring inspiration from what's happening here in the Netherlands, where I call home now, back to my former home and to wherever you are dialing in from, and really looking at how to inspire safer streets through empathy. So a little bit more about me, get my click, there we go. Actually, you know everything about me. I don't need to go into that any further. As much to say that about 2 months ago, after some research or some searching and working here as a consultant internationally, I did decide to start my own business back in February of 2025. And so now work as an equity mobility advisor independently, working with cities and communities and NGOs around the world to help really broaden this idea of bringing storytelling as far and wide as we can to improve and really improve access and the joy of cycling. So, my click is not working. There we go. So why an empathetic approach? Well, really, as was led to in the introduction, historically, many groups have been left out of the conversations around innovation and public space when it comes to mobility. And that impact goes beyond just limited access. So when I'm looking at an empathetic approach, it's really about challenging us all to think beyond the status quo of what we understand transportation to be. And it starts with asking, where are the opportunities to provide positive contribution? And so for today, I want to look at that from the idea of where cycling and micromobility can help address those gaps that we experience in daily life. And looking at that through the invisible impacts that we don't often think about when we're talking about mobility and well-being. Of course, physical health really comes into a lot of the conversations around active movement. Of course, we're moving our body, and that brings physical health benefits, but also looking at the mental health and social health benefits that come from looking at mobility from a much more equitable lens, a much more empathetic lens, and how all of that comes together for an overall better outcome for all of us and how we move. And so for today, I'm going to look at that from 3 elements for a more empathetic approach. Looking at it first from an age perspective, understanding that over our lifetimes, how we use mobility and the needs that we have for it change. Looking at that from a gendered perspective as well, understanding that gender does influence our mobility choices, despite working towards more equity between genders around the world. We do still find that gender does play a role in how we experience that. And then looking at that from the perspective of access, not just in terms of disability or limitations in mobility, but also in terms of access to opportunity. So with every presentation that I give, I begin with where we all begin as children, and essentially how we can look at inspiring autonomy for the next generation. It's where I got started in this space, cycling around Vancouver with my then 1- and 3-year-olds, and understanding that how they experienced the world was so impacted by how they moved. And so being able to move by cycling is one of the great ways of bringing that to more children. And because what we find ourselves in a lot of places is that we have essentially designed for a backseat generation. A lot of autocentric planning has reduced the safety on our streets for children, but also the independence that they experience. And this is having knock-on effects beyond just the physical ability to get to school or move around safely on our own, as some of us, myself included, may have experienced a long time ago. And what that looks like globally is that 81% of our children are not getting the daily minimum 1 hour of physical activity each day, because they're moving around in the backseat of their parents' car or their caregiver's car, really limiting how they access the world. And it's also actually impacting their mental health. We know globally there is a mental health, a depression epidemic being felt around the world, but particularly on our young people, by reducing their ability to move around freely, to be outdoors, to have that social contact. It's actually having knock-on effects in terms of their feelings of isolation, increased anxiety, and depression. And so when we're thinking about mobility, it's not just about getting from A to B for our children, but it's also about improving their well-being. So what I work towards with a lot of people, what I emphasize in my presentations is that this is about building autonomous, resilient, and happy children. And that's done through arguably some relatively simple steps in terms of providing traffic calming to enable safer environments for children to get back outside, to walk or cycle to friends' homes, to schools, to sports clubs, building that back into how they experience the world, not just with their parents, but also eventually independently. And what we see here in the Netherlands is that due to historic planning over the last 50 years to improve walking and cycling, particularly in neighborhoods, making sure that schools are well connected to safe infrastructure for kids, 2/3 of Dutch children walk or cycle to school. And what I think is particularly interesting and what was driving me in terms of my motivation when I lived in Vancouver is that this carries through into teenage years, and 75% of secondary school children arrive by bicycle. And what's important to know here is there's actually a reverse gender modal split for teenagers, where teenage girls cycle more than teenage boys. And I know in the context of a lot of cities, including Vancouver, that's where you see the drop off, particularly for young girls. And so providing the safe spaces beyond just building that autonomy and freedom back in for them, but also ensuring that young girls also feel welcome in the mobility network as well. And I'll get onto that a little bit more in a minute. And then vitally, what all of this does in terms of giving them the freedom to walk to school, to cycle, to move around the city independently, it's helping children build important risk assessment skills, which we all need as we age to learn what are my limits, how far can I go, where do I need to step back, and where should I show caution? And that's not possible when you're also always being shuttled around by your caregivers. So what does that look like in terms of practice? Well, across the Netherlands, there's the Dutch traffic education program that's taught in all schools. For those that know us, this is our son, Etienne. A number of years ago, he's much taller now and looking a little more like an adult than he is in this photo. But every Dutch child in their schooling programs from the early years in primary school start receiving traffic education. So looking at how they can understand the signs that they see on the streets, understanding safe rules for walking and cycling, and eventually building into physical skills in the older years. So doing trips to and from gymnasiums or school trips on bicycle, learning how to navigate in a classroom setting, and eventually leading to their last year of primary school with a Dutch traffic exam, which is done within the city on a prepared route with parent evaluators. And every child receives this national traffic diploma to say, you're all set for secondary school, off on your way, you now know how to navigate the streets. And this is not just a matter of learning how to navigate in a country where cycling infrastructure is very prevalent, and it's how not everybody, but most people move around, but it's also building this foundation for a lifelong skill that they will keep building along. You don't reach 75% of secondary school children cycling to school if you're not teaching those skills sustainably at a young age. Internationally as well, there are examples of what this can look like, and this in a broader scale. And in the city of Tirana, which I was able to visit last year, they have built in a cycling education program that is both about teaching young children how to cycle in a place that still has a burgeoning cycling network, is still relatively young in their cycling culture, but they want to build upon it even more, especially from the city and advocacy point of view. And so they do that through cycle training, but also through traffic gardens like you see here, where they build these safe environments for children to learn how to navigate in certain situations, when to stop, when to yield, and in two vital locations, one in the Grand Park, which you see here, but then also in the city center, and have taught thousands of children now who are now becoming this new generation of cyclists in Tirana, and is one way of helping to support that cycling culture before they get to the age of when they can actually use shared micromobility. We also need to consider the other end of the age spectrum and how we can support cycling into older adult years, and really providing that dignity to age in place while cycling. We know that as we get older, our mobility decreases, and at the same time, with that decreased mobility, we see higher levels of isolation, feelings of anxiety and depression in our older adults as well. And one way that is exacerbated is this idea that everyone can drive for as long as they're alive, which is in fact not, I mean, it might be what's happening, but it's not necessarily what should be happening, as we're outliving our ability to drive safely by 7 to 10 years. And at the same time, our segregated land use policies make it so that as people live further and further away from amenities and are dependent on a car to access them, seniors and older adults become dependent on others to provide them with their daily sustenance if they can't walk or cycle to reach groceries, to reach friends, to reach community centers, things like this. And so all of that compounded by reduced street life due to that high traffic really isn't helping our older adults in terms of that dignity and to be able to live in the life that they've built for themselves. And so if we look at this from providing for cycling, it means providing space for those high moments, building that social connection back in, which can only happen when we're moving around at a much more human scale and human pace. So that face-to-face contact releases oxytocin. It's the feel-good hormone. It makes us feel happy. It has been linked to helping to improve health, not serious disease, but it will help you feel a little bit better in your day. And we do this through creating walkable neighborhoods, cyclable neighborhoods with seating for resting, relaxed cycling routes, and understanding the role that adapted and electromobility have in how older adults move around. You've seen the lower picture, that's actually my in-laws riding a duo feats, which are available for rent in some locations around the country that provide this stable tool, electrified in a lot of cases, to move around with a partner or with a family member to maintain that physical access outdoors. In terms of a Dutch program of what that looks like on the national scale, there's the Doortrappen, or continuous cycling network, that has been developed. And these are not just the idea of these cycling superhighways that you might be familiar with from places like the Netherlands, but rather comfortable cycling routes that are within cities and connecting cities, with fewer areas for stopping, but ease of stopping when the need is there, fewer hills, fewer obstacles for people that are experiencing more balance issues, and ultimately safer. So in the instance of not an accident, but in the instance of something happening, they can stop easily and recover quite quickly. And so nationally, that's looking like all those little green dots on the screen are all the continuous cycling routes that are being developed around the country to ensure that seniors, regardless of where they live, older adults, have access to comfortable, safe, and cohesive cycling. We also need to be thinking about cycling and the mobilities of care, and how the care work that we do throughout our day and social safety are built into mobility and our mobility choices. So a gender responsive mobility really looks at care work, or the mobilities of care, which, if you're not familiar, are things like taking children to school, picking up groceries, running errands, all the work that we do in our day that is not paid. And while we are seeing a greater share of that across genders, like I indicated earlier, women still predominantly do this work. It's less economically focused, and unfortunately our design is much more focused on the commute to work. And so really looking at this from a successful implementation of shared mobility and cycling networks, we need to be thinking about also trip chaining and these shorter generated trips that relate to care work in order to better serve women's travel behavior. And we also need to consider social safety in that perspective and the role of women in leadership. We plan and design based on our experiences, and it's not to say that we have been designing necessarily all wrong historically, but because women have not been involved historically in the planning of our cities, they're not responsive to their needs. So the more that we can have women in those roles, the more that we can have them speaking to the challenges that many of us face when we're moving around, then we can start to address these problems because they're brought to the table where they might not have been before. From a shared mobility perspective, this is actually a huge opportunity, and Brendan will talk about this more when he presents, but looking at it from what can we offer that is much more responsive to care work. And one of those things would be a cargo bike share that can be accessed by those people that need it. Not everyone can afford a $2,000, $3,000 cargo bike to have in their home for moving children around. So having that ability to have that right tool for when it's needed really provides greater opportunity to make sure that mobility systems are responsive to the equitable needs of the people that might be using it. Similarly, looking at how we can adapt those machines. So this is a photo from a bike share in Vienna, in Austria, and there are similar cases in London, in Paris, in Bogota, in Colombia, where they're providing child seats on bikes, knowing that you might not always need one, but sometimes if you need to pick up a bike share and you have a kid, that might make things a bit challenging. And so providing things like a bike with a bike seat really opens up the opportunity for who might be able to have access to this bike share. And then also thinking from a social safety perspective, how can we provide things like bike parking facilities that understand the importance of feeling safe in these environments? And when it comes to designing cycle share or cycle parking facilities here in the Netherlands, there's a big push to ensure there are no dark corners, no blind spots where someone might feel uncomfortable and therefore not use the space. So lighting is key, making sure that there's big open spaces, monitoring, so cameras around to make sure people feel safe. So it's not just that your bike feels safe, but you feel safe using the facility even later in the evening. Moving on from gender, we have to look at access and looking at how cycling can be used as a tool for mobility for people with limited mobility. Because we have this myth around car access in that a very auto-centric approach assumes that everyone has equal access. And this really ignores the fact that depending on someone's disability, whether that is physical, visual, or neurodiversity, they might not be able to drive. And so we really need to be thinking about counting the trips that people do take or don't take, sorry, rather than just the ones they do, and understand why they're not taking those trips. We might assume looking at someone that if they wear glasses, oh, well, why can't you drive? But they might be have such low vision that they're not able to, or they don't have the physical means to be able to purchase an adapted vehicle to drive around. And so making assumptions around car ownership really limits people. But if we can look at our mobility infrastructure as a way to enable people, regardless of their mobility, look at it beyond just a cycle track, but rather a mobility track, we're helping to ensure that all of us on our scale from well to unwell, young to old, and all the in-betweens, that we can maintain our independent mobility. And what that looks like on the Dutch example is that 16% of all trips made by disabled people are pedal powered. And so it's also just making sure we understand that those with physical limitations might not look like it on a bicycle, but they might need that space. So understanding safe infrastructure is not just for cycling or for mobility devices, but for people that might need that extra space in the case of an incident where they don't have to suffer a severe consequence as a result. What that can look like, and you'll see a few cities adopting this in terms of thinking about shared mobility and how we can ensure that equitable access, is the Tembici bike share scheme in Bogota, where they have standard two-wheel bicycles, e-cycles, cargo bikes, and these hand cycles that can be attached to wheelchairs to provide that mobility. It's obviously not expansive across the system and requires a little bit of extra work, but it does ensure that even somebody who does move around in a wheelchair could have access to a electric hand cycle that will help them to navigate the city as well. And then finally, I know Chris, when he spoke at this webinar a few weeks ago, he talked about the link between bikes and trains. And I just want to reemphasize that cycling as a tool for prosperity is linked to public transport. And so we need to be talking about that and repeating that message over and over. We understand that the true cost of car ownership is actually much higher than most of us think. I looked up some Canadian numbers and they're roughly accurate. The years don't quite match up. But really what this looks like for most Canadians around the country is that 22% of their annual income is spent on personal transport for the ownership of a car. And if we're thinking of low income individuals, that's a huge burden that they might not be able to afford when they're trying to look at the prioritization of feeding themselves and their family and keeping a roof over their head. So linking cycling and public transportation, linking those multimodal opportunities really gives people choice. 81% of the population here in the Netherlands lives within 7.5 kilometers of a train station. 50% of all journeys on a train begin with a bicycle ride. But what's vital to that is that linking with public bike sharing schemes on the other side. And so this can look like a mobility hub, which you're seeing more and more throughout the country. These are very recognizable spaces at mobility hubs like train stations and bus stops, but also in neighborhoods where they have bike share available, as well as car share and scooter share to ensure people have options for micromobility. Oops, back up one, went too far. And it also looks like the Ove Fiets bike share. If you're unfamiliar, this is a national bike share scheme available at all train stations throughout the country, where you can rent a bicycle for 24 hours on your transport card and use that to do whatever you need to do at your destination station, whether that's getting to work, as Chris and myself do quite often, or taking a ride in the countryside if you want to have a little bit of recreation, accessing school for a lot of students. This is all part of how people make public transportation and cycling really synchronistic with each other. But in addition to that, there's also a commuting allowance that most employers will provide for their employees of 19 cents per kilometer. There's also a tax-free a tax rebate that you can apply for if you are paying for public transportation on your own when you're doing your income taxes. And then also an interest-free cycling lease scheme that a lot of employers provide. And even myself as an independent entrepreneur, I can apply for a similar grant scheme through the government. And so this altogether provides financial benefits to cycling for everyone and really makes the burden of paying for transportation, paying for public transport, paying for cycling a little bit easier, particularly for those people that might have more stretched incomes. So with that, I just want to close with saying that an empathetic approach to transport really supports more equitable mobility. It's multi-pronged. Thinking about our young people means building those skills that when they can access public bike share, they can use it, but it is still accessible as we age, that it provides for the needs of women and caregivers in terms of their diverse needs, that we're thinking about how we can make it more equitable for those that might need different tools to cycle around the city. And ultimately, we're looking at how to make sure that everyone, regardless of their socioeconomic status or where they come from, can access opportunity in the same way and how cycling can help support that. So with that, I will say thank you. If you would like to reach out and ask me more questions if we don't get to them, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to respond. And otherwise, at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to pass it over to Massa to share her story.
Thank you for sharing a portion of your life's journey with us and living this experience. It's awesome to see a woman in this world, considering that in some parts of the world, women are fighting for a right for education, not even to ride a bike. And so it's really nice to see that out there in the world with support of society. It's a different approach.
Thank you, Massa.
Mm-hmm. And so here I am. Disclaimer, I just did the slides now as it's just visuals to the experience overall, but it's not necessarily, it's not like what we were just going through. One moment. And I'm just gonna spotlight myself as a speaker. Perfect. Starting at a young age is crucial, and I couldn't not start from here. I'm very grateful for my family, for my dad. Since I was born and raised in Sham, we would say, in Damascus, Syria. And culturally, it's actually frowned upon for a girl or a woman to ride a bike. And I have one older sister, and my dad has always been very supportive, all of our family and my mom, very supportive to his two young girls to explore life. And so Friday mornings in Damascus is like the weekend, very, very early. Everyone's asleep. And when I was maybe 8, 9 years old, we would take our bike after I already had my practice in our home, where we're living on the last floor of a building and had some space to, like, in the terrace to ride around. And he would drive next to me very slow in the car while I bike on the sidewalk of Damascus, aiming to go to one big park, not like parks of like trees. Well, it has trees, but like it has also places where you have slopes and places to actually move around. It's a big place. And then there are rules. Get off the bike when we want to cross the street, even though there's no one. There's no one on the street, but I have to get off my bike, cross, get back up. No helmets. No, there were no helmets really in Damascus at the time, probably. But however, so I wanted to start with gratitude to my dad for teaching me how to bike and for being able to then move on with my life. And whenever there's a bike available, I can ride it, which is really nice. I went to, since this is with the Netherlands, I couldn't also not mention, as this came up yesterday when I was looking for photos, I had a transit during a flight one day, and a Polish activist met me there, and we spent a day. And I've never seen this many bikes in a place before, neither parked nor the people in motion. There's a really nice flow. And with gratitude, I have Vancouver training. Dubai is not a bike-friendly city, especially if you want to commute biking, because the areas are so far away from each other. The only time I biked was where I lived so much closer to where I worked. So I would bike, I could listen to one song. That was how short I was living to where I worked. So I had one song, that was my UAE experience of biking. I biked once around the desert as well. And then with gratitude, I came to Vancouver. I came to Vancouver in cherry blossom season of 2018, around this time, April 24, I arrived. I'll be 7 years in Canada now, coming up. And through networks and connections, I was informed of this program, this like a biking mentorship experience, where I get to be connected with a local Vancouverite. And in Vancouver, people like bike rain or shine, and it rains. Not everyone, but there's that vibe in the city. There are safer roads, places where you don't necessarily need to panic about having the cars run you over. And of course, still, you need to be aware you're on the road. And so I joined this program. And it was probably one of the best experiences that I was blessed to have coming into a new country. And I already had my first one uprooted from Damascus, Syria to Abu Dhabi and then to Dubai. And then my 2.0 version was Vancouver, BC. Within 5 weeks of my arrival, this program was starting. And I was connected with not just the person. So there, I don't know how much you know of this program, but I feel like it's part of this journey that I walk you through it as well. It's volunteer. People give and take, and there's gain and benefit to everyone involved. Because for the local Vancouverite who is, however they're spending their time, for the local person in the city, they want to contribute to this situation, to a solution, to sustainable solution. And having access to accessible resources that are enjoyable and beneficial is it's a big privilege, and it's available here in the city of Vancouver. With gratitude to this program, to so many organizations across the city. And so we connected with this person who would then, we meet every week. One of the really beautiful elements of this experience was consistency. For a season, for 3 months, there was consistency in meeting between the people, so that we were a big group, as you can see. This is me. As I was saying, this is the first time I grow my hair in 20 years. I've had my hair short almost my whole life. So we were a big group. So we connected as a big group, like less times. The consistency was always with the person who was the volunteer connected to the newcomer. And it wasn't just a program for refugees and immigrants. And not everyone knew how to bike. So it was nice to see also how other people experience the program. Because if you don't know how to bike, then you will go meet somewhere safe. You will be taught how to bike with your local volunteer. And if you know how to bike, then you're on the road. You're actually understanding how to bike in the city. There are rules. Oh, you raise your hand if you want to turn. Oh, this and there's a bike map, which is also really nice. I used to carry, it's like a paper one that folds. I used to carry it a lot at the beginning to understand, and also Google Maps helps. It's more gentler to my nervous system and to not feel panic that I'm biking on a bike route. Because yes, even though I'm biking to commute, I calculate my commute time so then I can enjoy this beautiful city everywhere. So then, it takes me however much time to get somewhere. I calculate a little bit more time, and I just go to enjoy the streets, be on my own, and with my biking mentor. This was later on, about maybe a year and a half later, with MobiBike. As part of the program graduation, we were gifted a 1-year access to the MobiBikes. So these MobiBikes, again, accessible access to enjoyable resources, and it's available. Normal bikes, where you get to understand how you need to lock your bike and what to do with your bike and how to put it on the bus. We had a full training to the group of how to put the bike on the bus. Where in the city, there's like on a wall, there's that bike rack of the bus. But as a newcomer, I wouldn't necessarily know where that is. Locals don't even know where that is. Then they knew. And so they took us to the rack, and then everyone got to train of how to put your bike on the bus. So then when life experience comes, easy. You just do it and move on. And if anything, you can help other people. Yeah, and I keep telling people about it. Even though it was that short experience, and then we concluded and we were gifted this 1-year access to the MobiBikes after. But I keep telling people about it because it was really life-changing for me. I got to know the city. I got to know a local person. I got to know how to bike in this city. And I was gifted access to bike anytime I want. And that was a big privilege. And then I learned that at some point, when the bike racks are full, if you call them, you give them the number for the bike, and then you can just lock it somewhere and tell them where it is. So that was also nice to know. Slides wise, I'll stop. I'm also aware of time. How would you like me to, 1 second, please? Okay, I have 1 minute. Perfect. Biking is my self-care. Coming to this place as with all of the traumas that exist that I lived through in my life, and it's all stored in my body. And I had 2 major injuries in my knee, and I was going through recovery, and my thigh was atrophied, and it was a big process. And I learned so many holistic practices for holistic well-being, where I get to then implement them while I am moving my body, clearing my mind. I would brainstorm and weave my stories for any storytelling experience on the bike. That was one of my favorite things to do. And so it's a beautiful, it's a really wholehearted experience. So I hope that all of us get to learn from one another, regardless of where we are in the world. There are systems that have worked somewhere, and it's about time that we don't reinvent the wheel and actually collaborate to move not just for a better future, but most importantly for a better presence. So thank you for that. Brendan, I'll give it to you.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Martha. Just gonna quickly share my screen. Just give me a second here while I get all together. Thanks. That was a great take, and thanks for sharing your story. All right. Melissa, great seeing your kids used in photography in your slide decks. I like to do that too. So the little guy that's on the back of this bike is my son, Callum. So we'll have featuring them in my work too. My name is Brendan James. I'm a transportation planning technologist with the District of North Vancouver. I'm originally from South Africa. So I always laugh and say that that's my Dutch heritage. But not really. So thanks very much for having me. I'm just going to take a couple minutes just to share a little bit about a program that we quite recently launched in the District of North Vancouver. And my previous background is educating general public and fleet managers and just getting people stoked on electric vehicles. So I started that in 2016 with Metro Vancouver Regional District. And our approach there was consumer-focused approach where we did a lot of events and took vehicles out to educate people on just more sustainable transportation, zero-emission transportation. And my career has progressed to the point now where I'm also doing that, but on a fleet context, but also focusing on different modes, walking, cycling, and specifically bike share. So just want to introduce you to the eCargo bike program. But before I get into that, I just see everybody is from different places and there's some people international. So I just wanted to sort of give you a little bit of context about where we are at right now. So North Vancouver is on the north part of Vancouver, on the city on the west coast of Canada. It is sort of the doorway to the sea to sky region. So down at the water, you can see here where it says Stanley Park at the bottom of this red square. We have a lot of our urban density there, and that sort of residential sprawl goes all the way up the hill, and I emphasize hill, the mountain to the top where we have our urban boundary. And the green parts over here, these are all we've got 3 different ski resorts in North Vancouver and West Vancouver, and this is just sort of untamed wilderness. It kind of takes you into beautiful backcountry, and we just live on the edge of the forest, and we're super blessed to be able to share this land with everybody. But the one thing I'd like to emphasize is we've got an incredible topography. So there are different, what I like to call benches at various different areas here. This yellow line that's on the map is our Highway 1, but it's a hill. So when you start at the water, you've got to head up to the forest, and there's quite an incline to be able to follow as a bike rider. So it has been quite tricky. I will tell you a little bit about that, e-bikes, e-bike share, and e-cargo bike lending program. So give you a bit of background about the program, some of the supporting policies from a municipal government standpoint, the goals, the phases, a little bit of the fun that we've had with the creative side, and I'd love to share some links with you all. A little bit about the program operations, and we've already got 2 months under our belt with a soft launch at the tail end of last year. So I've got some stats to share as well. So So a cargo bike. I was in Amsterdam last year in June for a conference, and I saw these things everywhere. So a great variety of biking technology, but generally bikes that is able to either carry small humans or a bunch of gear. If you're a hockey player, got a hockey bag or your groceries and things like that. Generally, cargo bikes are made to carry stuff, and that is a huge thing in the Netherlands and Europe. Not so big here in North Vancouver, but we've seen more of the long tail versions on the streets, and they're gaining popularity. So we have a great sort of history with biking in our community, and for the last couple of years, we've been operating a bike share program. And since 2021 to the end of that program pilot, which is about 2023, we had about 150,000 trips with quite a large user base. So it's been really well supported. We've had a lot of positivity around our bike share programs. And we're actually looking at a new phase of that bike share program coming up in the next couple of months. But our council brought forward a motion to explore cargo bikes. And we wanted to complement our e-bike share programs and supporting policies by really trying to emphasize different cargo bike and bike technology through programs that are outlined in our official community plans, our transportation plans, as well as emission reduction goals that are outlined in our community energy and emission plans. So we really want to be connecting with our residents and talking about different bike technology and really what the state of the market was and what options there are out there on the streets that they would be interested in trying. As well, we partnered with the city of North Vancouver, and they've got similar sort of bike share and bike infrastructure and goals in their official community plan. They've also got a mobility strategy, and they've also got some strategic goals that are in their council plan priorities. So we set out about a year and a half ago, and we developed some program goals, and we really just wanted to have a program that offered residents some low barrier access to new cargo bike technology, right? Almost like a try before you buy approach. No expectations. It was all about education. We really just want to give people an opportunity to ride a different bike, understand how e-bikes work, really just sort of check out the new tech, new designs. And we wanted to be able to create a program that's supported sustainable and active modes of transportation. In doing this too, we really wanted to collect a lot of data just about how the bikes were ridden, where they sort of went, user feedback, and how the whole thing was going to sort of assess the long-term feasibility of the bike share in North Vancouver. Could this be something that would be a part of our community in the future? How do we make it bigger, or how do we make this packaged for different communities within British Columbia, just not necessarily the lower mainland? We really wanted to have a formal documentation and evaluated program plans and sort of record the outcomes and costs in a format that can be easily shared with other jurisdictions. That's sort of our primary mandate. We don't want to have other jurisdictions that are understaffed and sort of like underfunded be able to do this work over and over and over again. We want to create a program that we can share and can be easily set up in another community quickly with sort of low barriers as well. So we began with phase one, which is a program development and sort of outreach phase. We're now in phase two, so we're well into operations, which is great. We're collecting data. And then sort of at the end of phase two, we're going to be doing evaluation, analysis, and reporting. Happy to share that. It will be shared widely once that final report is out. We really want to be able to share the outcomes with other jurisdictions. We went through in phase one and we did some really cool program creative stuff. So we had a 4-part sort of video series. I'm going to share the YouTube links with you in the chat here. It was super great getting different families and different people out on cargo bikes and telling their story about how they were already using cargo bikes to maybe get their kids to school or maybe just to commute around North Vancouver itself. So that was last summer. I had a blast. I have a great job. What can I say? So I'd love to share these stories with you in this great content too. Right now, we've got a fleet of about 8 e-cargo bikes that are borrowed from our libraries, so our district and city libraries. We also have an additional bike at one of our rental building property in the city of North Vancouver, which is a slightly different group or sort of like user group. And we're doing some data collection there just about having that bike as an amenity for a rental building, which is really valuable data to collect as well. We've got two different styles. So we've got a long tail bike, which has 2 wheels and bars on the back. And we also have a trike, which is a box bike or a bakfiets, as they call it in Europe or in the Netherlands, which has a little box for like 2 kids or cargo in front. So that has 3 wheels. Geographic boundaries for the program are limited to North Vancouver and West Vancouver only. So we don't really want these bikes going downtown, but we want to keep them on the North Shore. We're also working with a program operator. So we have BCAA has a division of a bike share called Evolve, and we've been working with them through a contract, and they deliver this program on our behalf, and they take care of all of the management of the bikes, the maintenance. They've got an app booking system, any customer support. They do all the safety orientations with the library staff as well. They're going to be doing all the risk management, reporting, and analytics. So finally, just a quick snapshot, because I know we're running to time, but last year we had 57 days in operation successfully at the end of the year in September and October. We had about 136 trips during that time, which is incredible, with 7 bikes that were deployed. And 136 trips with 88 riders. Obviously, this is considerably less than our e-bike share program, but these were still really positive results and really exceeded my expectations. At the end of the year, I was like, wow, this is incredible. So hundreds of kilometers traveled, really, really great response from the general public. And we've seen a lot of positive feedback in sort of like Reddit forums, and just generally feedback from general public has been really, really super positive. In terms of new riders, we sort of like had other data on demographics, so just sort of like age characteristics, gender, and then just a breakdown of how many riders were infrequent, occasional, or people that did more than 3 trips. I think I was a power rider because I was definitely doing a lot of tests on that one. But just really, in terms of duration, the most popular trip was generally less than 60 minutes, people just trying it out, but we definitely have people take it for much longer. And then just finally, just going through ridership data again, obviously the highest day of riderships were Saturdays, 10 a.m. on a Saturday. Obviously come and do that and then grab a cup of coffee afterwards. And generally the weekdays were a little bit quieter. So I'm going to end there. Happy to answer any questions. I want to send these links, and I'd love you guys to check out this content, as well as I'll put a link in the chat just about the program website on the DMV website. That's the District of North Vancouver. We're running this program in conjunction with Evolve, the City of North Vancouver, and our district and city libraries as well. There's some other namely partners such as TransLink, BC Hydro, and Landlord BC. And our phase 1 of this program, the communications phase, was also funded by the BC Alliance of Healthy Living. And that was incredible grant funding that we derived from them. We're really, really happy to have a whole host of collaborative grant funders for this program, and looking forward to future success. Thanks very much for listening, folks. I'll put those links in the chat.
Thank you so much, Brendan. It's 1 o'clock, so I do realize that we are at the end time for our webinar. We did build this as a Q&A, so I just want to be respectful of that. And we are going to be taking all the questions that you've posed in the chat and asking the presenters to respond to those at a later time. Hi everyone, my name is Kathy Acuna. I'm with Hub Cycling. I'm the community manager. And on behalf of Hub, we really want to thank Melissa, Brendan, and Massa for their time and for their great presentations and for their really powerful stories. You've provided a lot of us on the call with a lot of things to take forward on an advocacy level and on a personal level and hopefully on a municipal and provincial level. Thank you also to the Consulate General of the Netherlands in Vancouver and to Sebastian for moderating. And the Consulate General would like to continue these types of webinars in the future, but they really would like your input on what types of information you would like to see in the future. So here on the screen, you will see a QR code that will take you to just a really quick survey where you can input your suggestions. And we'll also send the chat. We'll also send the link in a future email with a recording of this presentation. They really want to continue to build stronger relationships between Canada and the Netherlands, so your input is highly valued. Again, Hub wants to extend a big thank you to our presenters and to the Consulate General of the Netherlands for their support. And if you'd like more ways to get involved in Hub, or if you've enjoyed today's webinar, you can support Hub's advocacy work by donating at bikehub.ca/donate. And as the presenter said, feel free to connect with them on LinkedIn. And if they feel comfortable, they can put their social media handles in the chat as well. We really apologize that we couldn't get to the Q&A time, but we felt that the presentations and stories that were shared by Masa and by Melissa and Brendan, just we really didn't want to cut them off. So feel free to leave the meeting now, and we will leave the chat open. And have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much again for joining us.
Kathy, I'm happy to stay if anybody wants to ask questions. No
Okay.
worries. Yeah,
It's great. I know you guys are on your lunch break, and Melissa,
Same.
it's getting for you, so I understand if you want to log off.
no problem. Yeah, I can stay for 10 minutes. How about that?
Okay.
Shall
I
I
can
shall
do
I
10
take
minutes. It's okay.
Okay.
shall I take one of the questions, because I saw one of the questions which I can answer very quickly.
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay.
I saw a question by Ross McFarland. How do you recommend responding to positions and statements like, "Oh well, this is not Europe. We're not the Netherlands. How can we deprioritize the car in Vancouver's built environment?" Look at pictures of Amsterdam in the 1970s. It was totally car infested. There was no room for bicycles, no room for pedestrians. You can do it anywhere. If we can do it in the Netherlands, we're not smarter than Canadians or South Africans. You can do it anywhere. It's a policy choice. It's a political choice. It's a choice for health and sustainable transportation. I don't know, Ross, whether that answers your question.
Sebastian, can I add to that as well?
Sure.
I would just say that look around the world as well. So I would just be like a shameless plug for my book that comes out in the autumn, but in that we showcase 11 cities and organizations around the world, not in the Netherlands, that are investing in cycling and building out equitable systems. So places like Paris, Barcelona, Bogota,
Exactly.
in Tirana, in Sydney. So it is happening around the world, and it can happen in places that are hilly, hot, flat, wet, cold. Yeah.
Funny enough, the pandemic gave it a push in many cities. Which
Yes.
Many cities became more sustainable transport open because of the pandemic, which I find really interesting.
I think from our perspective, there's been such an advance in technology that has not only opened cycling up again for riders that gave it up maybe a decade or two decades ago due to health reasons. They just couldn't ride a regular bike anymore. And I think that electric bike technology has come so far, and just lithium ion battery technology has allowed and opened so many doors for bikes to go up hills much easier, much lighter, and just being more accessible to more people. So I hear that comment a lot. I hear that comment, from elected officials as well, where they just feel sort of helpless, and the fallback is the prioritization of the vehicle, the personal vehicle, and we have to really just continue to push and educate in just sort of the advancement of technology and have a more equitable approach for mode shift.
I heard somebody from Mobicon say one day, like, if you only give 5% of the roads to bicycle and other sustainable mobility, then the problem is really solved. You have a whole network. It's only 5%, 1 out of 20 roads, which I found an interesting comment. I mean, it's hard to implement, I'm sure, but the thought process is quite interesting. And it makes it more equal. Like, you have more access. When bicycles are cheaper, so people have more access.
Mm-hmm. During the pandemic in Vancouver, there's a big park called Stanley Park, and that usually has like a pedestrian lane, biking lane, and then the cars. During the pandemic, which was very challenging to people around the world. In Vancouver, it was actually a bit lighter.
Yep.
And so like that road for the cars became for the bikes and pedestrian became more for pedestrian, like, you know, things could adjust. And then by people being active, it's like, you know, it's like drugs to the body. When you're physically active in nature outside with fresh air, you know, it's taking people also into a more purposeful, meaningful life. But I also wanted to highlight that again, some parts of the world, women and girls can't even bike.
Yeah.
And or like, you know, they're not even a place for bike, even for a man on a bike. So just remembering other parts of the world, as for me, as I live here in Vancouver, it's a very, very big privilege.
There's one more question from Duncan. What is saturation, quote unquote, in terms of cycling adoption trip metrics? What is the percentage of trips achieved in the Netherlands in 2023 or 2024?
I assume with that, Duncan, you're referring to just overall mode share of cycling. I'm going to assume that because I don't know in terms of adoption, but I think nationally right now, the trips are about, mode share is about 25%, which doesn't sound quite high. There are some cities where that mode share is above 50%, but nationally it sits at 25. But it's one of those tricky things where it feels too low from what you see here, but it is, everyone here, it generally has a bike, also cycles. And then we have like the training programs with children, but also I didn't get a chance to mention it, but there's a national program called, it translates to Cycling for Everyone, and it does cycle training and provision of bicycles for low income and for newcomers to basically provide them with the tool they need to cycle as well. And so that's one of the ways they're trying to address adoption in newcomers to the country that maybe couldn't cycle where they're coming from, as you pointed out, Massa, or have never learned to cycle before, and also for people who maybe can't afford to buy a bicycle, but have the ability. There's in Rotterdam, for example, they have the Fietsbank, so the cycle bank, essentially, where they have reclaimed bicycles. So we have a huge problem with in bike parking here, where people will abandon bicycles and then they're collected by the cities and then placed into depots. And what this program does is collect those bikes, repurpose them, refurbish them, and give them back to the community, so that there's this upcycling essentially happening to try to encourage more people to cycle without and remove the barriers to doing so.
Great, thanks, Melissa. I don't see any other questions that haven't already been answered in the chat. So thank you for staying the extra 10 minutes and answering. Massa, please. Sorry, go ahead. I see your hands up.
I just wanted to add, like, I drive, okay? So like I came from Dubai to Vancouver with intention, I want to drive and like ready to shift into my driver's license. And this program came. And I was taught how to bike, and I was given access to mobility and equitable access to mobility. It took me 4 years to get my driver's license. I didn't even try to approach it. I was biking everywhere. It's just it's a change in lifestyle, especially for newcomers, as they're coming into this new environment, new place, new city, wherever it is in the world. How are they stepping in? So having that access could really actually go into a lifestyle more easily. And maybe since
go ahead, sorry.
No, I just wanted to leave on like since it's like any other business with, like, you know, congratulations on your book. I look forward to, congratulations on your book. I can't say anything else. But I am in Vancouver for 9 days, and I'm currently in a shift in my career. I'm interviewing for different positions. Wish me luck. I have a nice one today, so maybe that unfolds. But then also, I don't know what opportunities are around or who might want to do something. And so if you actually want to make something happen together, we can connect, especially if in Vancouver for the next 9 days, we can meet in person.
Fingers crossed.
If you want me to join your team.
Fingers crossed for your interview today, Massa. We'll be sending you good vibes.
Appreciate it.
And thank you. And like you were saying, for the newcomers, I've when you're biking, you don't have that windshield between you and your community, and it does really build on the more social connections that we see that really benefit creating healthier and happier communities, not just here in Vancouver, but across the globe. And I think somebody in the chat mentioned that the part of biking they loved most was saying hi to their neighbors and being able to connect on a more personal level. So on that note, thanks so much everyone for joining us, and Melissa, Sebastian, Brendan, and Masa, thank you again. And we will send through a recording and any resources that our presenters would like to share. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Thank you.
Bye.